Greetings, fellow riders of the Hypnotic Hurricane. I'm Chris Thompson, and you're listening to Brain Software, episode 164, direct from the Hypnotic World Epicenter, Toronto, Canada. Pull up a chair and relax, because we've got a story for you.
Hey man, what's happening, Scro? I'm about a gajillion light years away from home, so don't bother responding. By the time I got your message, I'd look like Milton Erickson, man. Just freewheeling it out, pouch. Anyway, bag, looks like I'll be doing more spots, which is really far out. Turns out the Hypno North updates from Breda were way too Ken Sweatman, Scro. Technically, I'm his boss. I told him to ease up on the details, give us some content that counts, man. But I digress. Here's one from the mailbag. Dear Dr. David Ambrose, the people's physicist, how can I get as smart as you are? It's a common question, man. Here's the answer. It's real simple. Just get born with a genius IQ and go to MIT or Stanford, get awesome degrees, and only hang out with cool people, man. That immediately eliminates dicks like Niels Bohr. And listen to a lot of Jefferson Airplane, King Crimson, and Rush, Scro. That'll do it. Oops, it's getting late. Okay, Scro, gotta run. Kill physics
Hang on. Whatever happened to that old tranquility we used to know? These are days of victory! So welcome to the Hypnotic Welcome Wagon, a man of tremendous refinement.
Oh, yes.
The official dream director of the Brain Software podcast, and the official lesser of two evils, Mike Mandel.
I love that. The official lesser of two evils. That means you're worse than me.
That is brilliant. Yeah, it does
Thanks,
mean
buddy.
that. That's
Really?
so wrong.
And the weird thing is, we're at work.
Right now.
Right now. Okay, what do we got coming up?
All right. Well, we are still working hard on our NLP course, which we're hoping to release in around, I'm going to say it, January
New Year
of 2021. That's our goal. Okay. In the meantime, there's a couple of things I want to make sure that everyone has access to. First of all, the feedback that has been coming in heavy is all amazing on the Journey to the Castle free hypnosis recording that we made a couple of months ago now. MikeMandelHypnosis.com/castle. You can download the whole thing. It's awesome. It's about 35 minutes long. It is, honestly, Mike, it's the best hypnosis recording you've ever designed.
Thank you, Chris. And I intend to surpass it in the new year.
Yeah, it's crazy amazing. So just get it. You'll love it. You'll love it. MikeMandelHypnosis.com/castle. I'll also just mention, if you haven't yet listened to episode 163, the episode right before this one, it was all about hypnotic language patterns that you can use in everyday conversation. We think you'll love the episode. We think that you will love joining the Mike Mandel Hypnosis Academy, and you can have a free trial to our flagship online hypnosis training and certification program right from our website, MikeMandelHypnosis.com.
Hurrah!
All right, let's get
buddy.
on. Today, what's the theme for today? And then let's do our think
theme for today
tank.
is stories, symbols, and metaphors.
That's right. So you're going to learn. We haven't actually talked about this in probably 5 years on the podcast.
I know.
So we're coming back to it. Before we do, we're going to deploy the think tank. We're going to discuss 3 words that are going to help activate our reticular activating systems to aim these words at being creative in our discussion of the topic of metaphors. What are the words, Mike?
That was well done, Chris.
Thank you.
Well, the actual think tank came up with the words enthusiasm.
I think I might have unconsciously seen that as I was so enthusiastic in my remarks about it.
Yes. Singer is the second one.
I was almost singing.
And the last one is thought.
I thought I was almost singing.
So that's not bad. A little less enthusiasm. How do we come up with these, Chris?
So enthusiasm, I think this is such an important one for us, because to me, enthusiasm is an indicator of fun, which you know is my word for the year.
I know.
Right?
It slips away sometimes.
Also, we have had discussions about how fun needs to be always a factor in everything that we do. In fact, we will forgive, or forego, I should say, we will forego growth in our business if it's not fun.
Damn right.
So everything we want to do is about having fun, and we need to be enthusiastic about it. So I think that's a good metaphor for life.
That's very good, actually, Chris. It's well put. Enthusiasm shows up in handwriting. Do you remember how?
Oh, geez, you're challenging me.
5
Enthusiasm
seconds.
on. No, I can't get it. I fail. I admit it. I very enthusiastically admit that I fail at that question.
Enthusiasm
How does it show up?
in graphology shows up with a very long T-bar.
Oh, right, of course.
The longer the T-bar, the greater the enthusiasm, which is persistence of will.
I'm so disappointed in myself.
And if it points upward slightly, we're adding the trait of optimism. So make your T-bars long.
I recovered by getting the upward slant right.
Long, pointed up. And that will build in enthusiasm with optimism as well. He's making strange gestures, just paying no attention to the man behind the curtain. Norman Vincent Peale wrote years ago, and he said enthusiasm makes the difference. I think he's right, because enthusiasm is a leadership trait.
And if you when we get into our metaphor discussion, you want to be telling your stories with some level of enthusiasm, right? Can you imagine telling a story? So I was at the store, and this guy came in.
You sound like David Blaine.
It's just really
David Blaine, man. The guy's an amazing magician, but his voice, to me, always sounds like they said Ackley sounded in what's the freaking book with the red cover?
I don't know, but let's move on.
No, we're nailing this down.
You sound enthusiastic about that.
Salinger.
When you said book with a red cover, it just made me think of my calculus.
Salinger's book about Holden Caulfield. Of course, Chris is not going to clue it.
No, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Anyway, he said Ackley. Ackley to me sounds like, in my mind, like David Blaine. He always sounds like this. Put the card back in the deck. Like really tired and really freaking bored. You need enthusiasm, David. I'm just asking for some. Not one flew over the cuckoo's nest.
So that we are going to get on to the the words here. But that's
Singer is the next one.
Okay, we'll just skip what I was going to say entirely, because we're going to get on to Singer. Singer is a brand of sewing machines.
Right.
Yeah, and it's high quality, isn't it?
And it's a person sings.
Yes, and it's also a singer, the person who is singing. So when you think about a singer, have you ever noticed a professional singer who doesn't sing with enthusiasm?
Well, you can sing with too much enthusiasm.
Yeah.
Kate Bush, who I absolutely love, and when she was young, I think she's probably one of the most beautiful women on earth, to my wife's chagrin. But Kate Bush, I said to a woman once, a therapist, I said, "Do you like Kate Bush?" She said, "No, I do not." And she responded so strong. I said, "Why not?" She said, "She's too enthusiastic when she sings." I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "She's like one of those people who sings kids' songs but gets into it way too much."
Oh, man.
I said, "Okay, that kind of was a weird thing."
Weird.
Now,
kind of like us when we sing Seal.
Yeah, what about Thought?
Well, I have thoughts about that, Mike. I think that, how about this? To me, it ties in with the enthusiasm again. I just think it ties in so well. So we all have thoughts, but sometimes our thoughts can be less enthusiastic, less happy, less fun.
What do you
less
mean?
Encouraging.
Like just on a general.
We can dwell on negative things, or we can be enthusiastic and spend our time and energy, our thoughts about positive things.
Like Catcher in the Rye. I just Googled the freaking book. Okay, now we're ready to go.
There you go.
Okay, so let's be enthusiastic about this. We're not going to sing, although maybe. And let's put some serious thought to stories and symbols and metaphors. Why stories, symbols, and metaphors, Chris? Because they are part of every culture on Earth, and probably Mars too.
I think Elon Musk would agree with you.
He would. Now, before there was written language, which arguably was probably cuneiform, but before that, people told stories. Stories were part of every culture and were passed down. People would learn the great stories of their heritage.
Mm-hmm.
You see this with Native North Americans. We see it with the Aboriginals of Australia. They talk about the dream time, and there is a deep history and tradition of storytelling that have to be told a certain way with a certain timbre, and they have an immense power to change people, as you know. In fact, it was one of my wonderful agents years ago, Carol Brickenden, who is also retired. She was the one who taught me how to do keynotes, because I had come to keynotes as a trainer. Now, a keynote speaker comes in for half an hour, speaks to a group, and is generally inspiring and so on. But because I had come in as a trainer first and foremost, I didn't quite know how to do them. They're closer to training than a keynote. And she gave me the key. She said, stories. She said, light on content, strong on stories. It is the stories they will remember. And she's right, because stories can convey a really deep truth and they can cause people to transform. Do you use stories with your kids when you were growing up with, or having them grow up with you?
Oh, definitely.
Having them grow up.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Yeah, for sure. Stories are wonderful. Stories first of all, stories are never about you.
And not about
Even though they are, they're never seen as being about the person you're telling the story to. So there's no resistance. There's natural emotional building, which creates often things like curiosity, which will have people open to learning.
Right.
Right. So, and of course, they can be humorous and they're just fun.
And they engage the imagination. You know, my father used to tell me this story all the time. And it wasn't till I was about 7 that I finally saw through it. But at nighttime, I'd say, Dad, tell me a story. I say, okay. He'd come out to my room and he said, it was a dark, stormy night. So right away, it's rain. So I'm all happy. And he said,
maybe that's why you like rain.
Probably. He said, 2 witches sat in the mouth of a cave. And the first witch said to the second witch, Jake, tell us a story. And this is the story he told. It was a dark, stormy night. And he'd just keep going. And I think I must have tranced out or something. Yeah, I thought it was the most wonderful thing.
That's the story version of 100 bottles of beer on the wall. Yeah.
Only there's no end in sight, you know. But stories will engage our emotions. You know, our dear friend Freddie Jacquin, phenomenal hypnotist and hypnotherapist, said, create an emotion, give a suggestion. When we get someone emotionally involved, the stories will explode with power. They'll go right into their unconscious. Remember, I told you, Chris, at our cabin about 6 years ago, there were a bunch of little kids up there, and I told them we were going to play this game. And I never even got to the game because my story about the game was so scary that one of them had freaked out, and I had to do tapping on him and everything.
Podcast 165 is going to be all about trauma. Folks.
How to frighten your children. Yeah, I'm kidding. But they said, will any other people be playing it? And just my imagination kicked in, and I said, yes, 3 other people. They said, do we know them? I said, 1 you know, 2 you've never met. And the girl Jordan said, well, where are they now? I said, 2 are up in the woods there watching us, and 1 is under the tarpaulin of the boat on the beach waiting for me to chase you over there. That was it. That was it. The crying started. The kids started freaking out. We hadn't even played anything.
Did you get in trouble?
Oh, I got in horrendous trouble. The kid's father was mad at me, but he was kind of a wimpy guy, so he didn't say much. I apologized about 1,000 times. He said, you shouldn't play games like that with the kids. I said, we never got to play the game. I just talked about it. And Heather said, Mike, you're a hypnotist, for God's sake. Anyway, stories will change people. They can convey really deep truths and even cause transformation. And Aesop's fables are an example of this.
Tell me more about that.
Well, you know, the dog in the manger. A manger is where an animal eats hay. And the story is of a dog in the manger barking, wouldn't let the cattle to the manger. And it's a short little metaphor, but the idea is the dog couldn't eat the hay, but was preventing the cattle from getting there too. That's the lesson it's teaching, right? That if you can't use it, let somebody else have it. Don't keep that kind of thing. Or, you know, the monkey, the hand reaching in a jar for a handful of nuts,
and
unable to remove them because it
escape.
won't let go of the damn nuts.
Yeah.
So all of these things are examples of stories that can teach lessons. Stories can be hypnotic. I said the wise women of tribes, the shaman who was the medicine man, the priest or the rabbi in religious circles. I mean, any good minister knows how to tell a good story, a sermon illustration. You can buy books on 2,000 sermon illustrations. And, you know, there was a rabbi and a minister and a Catholic priest. I mean, there's a million jokes start that way, none of which I can actually repeat. But when you think about it, Chris, where did they tell these stories?
I don't know, around campfires.
Yes, they actually did.
Yeah.
And that became a rich tradition for, you know, camping trips and stuff. You sit around the fire and you tell stories. And the fire, the staring into the fire, I think you got a trance induction there.
Oh, you know what? That's a really good point. Because if I think back to just camping trips with my buddies years ago, what would we do at night? Sit around the campfire and usually just tell stories about our collective past, stupid stories from when we were a few years younger, right? And we would just be howling and laughing and enjoying ourselves well into the evening.
Just guys with guys
just by
doing
telling
guys things.
Stories.
Yeah, of course. And it's the lost art of conversation. The greatest conversationalist who ever lived was Dr. Johnson out of England, whose the book of his life was written by Boswell. And Johnson was a brilliant, brilliant mind. They called him England's greatest mind. But he knew how to have a conversation that could convey truth. It could challenge people's beliefs. And recognize, guys, every time you start to tell a story, it's impossible to tell one without some kind of implication. Now, the great stories, Chris, are always about overcoming something. You notice that?
Well, pretty much look at every Disney movie.
Good point. And even you have lent me that Elon Musk biography, which is sitting in my stack, my pending stack to read next. I just opened at the beginning where he says, "Do you think I'm crazy?" That's how it starts.
Yeah, what a
and
good hook.
It's a hook. It grabs me right away. But I will bet without having read it, there's a hell of a lot in that book about him overcoming difficulty
absolutely.
to get to be where he is.
Overcoming challenges is a huge part of storytelling.
Now, the best stories, when you're crafting these as metaphors, my writing teacher, Cordelia Strube, a best-selling author in Canada, I hired her years ago to give my wife and I writing lessons in our home. And she said, jump right into the middle of the story. That's where you start. Don't say, once upon a time there was a man and he went and got a job. No, boring. Start like the Odyssey does.
Yeah.
The first word in the Odyssey is rage, exclamation mark.
Yeah.
It just jumps in.
It's funny because I was just thinking, the storm was raging in my mind.
Beautiful.
And there we were in the middle of the river, paddling, hoping we would find land. Something like that.
And then you got all these catchphrases that trigger this chilling sort of implication, like the calls are coming from inside the house.
Yeah, there you go.
The road is washed out. Like can't get hold of the police.
Started.
The banging has started. I thought you said the hanging.
When you say jump right in, that reminds me of a copywriting course that I took, writing copy for the web or emails or whatever.
I thought you must have.
And one of the pieces of advice was, once you're done writing, go back to the beginning and you'll probably just get rid of the first paragraph or at least first sentence. The idea being to jump right in.
Right.
You don't need to, I'd like to tell you a story all about whatever it is. No. Just dive right in.
Well, even Thomas Hardy in Return of the Native, the first sentence is, a Saturday afternoon in November was approaching. It's like that just leads to something. It makes me want to, approaching what?
Curiosity.
So, indeed. And that will make your metaphors even better. Now realize your stories will contain symbols, and some are universals. Like a mountain is generally a symbol of conquest.
Achievement and conquest. Yeah.
Achievement is right. And we see this over and over when we're doing mindscaping. People have mountains in their mindscapes, either who feel their future is too difficult or those who are high achievers.
That's right.
Who need that to pull them forward. An eagle is a great symbol of triumph. The Roman legion carried eagles on poles and made of bronze or something. The American eagle, it's a symbol of triumph. And even if you remember, Chris, in our stop smoking method, when the person comes out of the castle free of the smoking,
the eagle is flying
soaring,
and the flag is unfurled and flying.
And all the symbols of victory. So recognize when you add a symbol to your story, it will resonate at some point.
Let's talk about some other symbols. How about things like reflections?
Now, reflections are symbols of the unconscious mind. And when we add symbols of the unconscious, my theory is the unconscious will pay attention. A mirror, like you said, reflection, symbol of the unconscious. You're looking at another you, the one beneath the surface.
The reflection in the water, the reflection in the window.
Alice in Wonderland, she went through the looking glass, through the mirror. Alice also went down the rabbit hole, and a hole in the ground is another symbol.
As is a staircase.
Staircase leading down. And a forest, a dense forest, Hansel and Gretel, lost in the woods, the unconscious mind, what's lurking there.
And the moonlight.
The moonlight, especially the full moon, because the sun is daylight, the moon is night, and the hidden, and it's reflected light, another symbol of the unconscious. When we put it over a pond of water, we're getting a double whammy. Yeah. Pond of water, what bodies are going to float to the surface? You never
or
quite
what's
know.
Underneath it. Yeah.
What's under that? What's underneath that? A well. We throw money into a wishing well, hoping to get a response. Wells go way down into the ground. So when we add these to our stories as hypnotists, we say a metaphor in our thinking, a simile is making a comparison using like or as.
Yeah.
Like he was like a race car driver, whatever it is. A metaphor doesn't use like or as. It just, he was, a monster, that sort of thing. But hypnotically, a metaphor is a story that works like software in the person's mind. You like that?
Yeah, I like that a lot. That's a really good way of explaining it, because when you're listening to a story, let's talk briefly about how this works. So how do people relate to stories?
Right. Well, they're going to map them across to what's ever in their own life.
Right. Resources from their own past.
Right.
Knowledge, experience, skills, memories.
Yes. And that's why Erickson, the master of this, so many of his stories would begin, which reminds me of a patient I once had.
That's right.
Then he was going to nail you with hypnosis.
Yeah.
So you will cause trance by telling these stories, especially when you're coupling it with our hypnotic language cards. You can cause people to go into trance states. The question is, are you seeing it happen? I got another email the other day from someone who's joined our academy, and I've never been able to experience hypnosis myself, although I'm a good hypnotist, and I give my stock answer. The question is not whether or not you can go into trance, but whether you recognize it when you are there.
Yes.
And it's the same when you're telling stories. Always be calibrating. Are you noticing the shifts in the other person as you're unpacking this rich tapestry that can change people's minds? That's why we put in Meta 5s every episode. These are real experiences from our lives, but they will resonate with your unconscious mind. Erickson, I said, was the master of the metaphor, and people would pay him a lot of money to just talk to them. And in his early days, he said he was way too directive with his hypnosis. And then he would learn to just segue people's attention. The person comes in for pathological nail biting where their fingers are bleeding, and he'd look out the window and show them how beautiful the lawn was and talk about when his family first came to the U.S., how they had a lawn that was like a golf green. The person's thinking, this guy's an idiot. I'm paying $60 an hour for him to talk about his lawn. And they go home and discover they've never bitten their nails again. Mm-hmm. It's amazing, amazing stuff. Now, I wanted to ask you, we say that stories from your own life are really good ones, even if you alter them slightly to make them fit, because you will tell them congruently. Because they happened, right?
I learned that from you.
You'll tell it congruently. But my question is, Chris, what stories, even films that are stories, impacted you when you were young?
Oh, man. The first one that comes to mind, I don't know why, is the movie The Karate Kid. Because it's such a good story about somebody overcoming a challenge, right?
Overcoming a challenge again.
I just remember that was just a fantastic movie when I was a kid. I loved it. And so movies like that. I think other movies, I loved the Schwarzenegger movies. Just the idea of being strong and being able to defeat the bad guys, right?
Yeah.
That was a recurring theme because I was a skinny little kid and, didn't like being picked on and stuff like that. So movies like that resonated with me and made me want to be bigger and stronger and smarter.
That's awesome, man. Yeah. Like with me, I never really gravitated much towards the sci-fi as much as I did to what, swords and sorcery. Mm-hmm. That's why Lord of the Rings is such a big deal for me, because it's about everything. When I was a kid, I loved the stories, Jason and the Argonauts. That was a pretty hack film with the guy fighting skeletons and stuff with a sword. But it was interesting. I loved it as a kid. And The Thief of Baghdad, there were multiple versions of this, but the Steve Reeves one, I saw at the Prince of Wales Theatre that many years later became a theater where I did hypnosis shows, but that was a great one. It was there was something remarkable about it. And it had images of a blue rose and these guys who fought on his side. And these things went deep, and I can still get the feeling back to this day when I think about it. So when you think of Karate Kid and those, Arnold films, do you get that sense of what it was?
Absolutely. I can put myself back in the parking lot after leaving the theater with my two friends, and there we are running in the parking lot and, throwing kicks in the air and just doing stupid stuff as we're walking back to whichever parent's car had driven us there.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah, I remember reading years ago about one of the martial arts films, one of the ones from Run Run Shaw or from Hong Kong, played in a theater, and there was a riot in the theater, and the police came in and started arresting these guys, and the guys are trying to do all these moves off the move, but they couldn't do them, so they're just getting the crap beat out of them and hauled out in handcuffs. But that's a true story. But, isomorphism is a huge thing when you're crafting a metaphor, and basically it's just this. Everything in your metaphor maps across to something in the person's life that you're telling this to. So let's say the person keeps putting on weight. Erickson would tell his tomato plant story. And I used to love growing tomatoes because no matter how big they'd get, they just stopped. They had a limit on their own. Mm-hmm. And the person's brain goes, oh, just like me being so damn heavy, I must be like a tomato plant. And it would stop. They'd stop gaining the weight, and then he could start reversing it. Mm-hmm. Isomorphism is a one-to-one correspondence, and it's going to map across. But at this point, Chris, we have to pause because we have a commercial break from the Shiz-jig Corporation.
Okay, son, you're all set to go.
Really, Dad?
Are you sure they'll let me in?
Of course they will, Danny. You're part of the Shiz-jig Corporation tribe now, and that CEO ID card will get you just about anywhere.
But will it get me into Dealey Plaza?
Of course, son. How do you think Lee Harvey Oswald got into the Texas School Book Depository?
Will it get me into Cape Canaveral, Dad? Into those vehicle assembly buildings that are this tall?
Sure will, son. That's how Gus Grissom gets in. And stop waving your arms around when you speak, Bill Gates. This isn't a grain elevator, you know.
Will it get me through the gates of Buckingham Palace, Dad?
Not only that, it'll get you a knighthood, too.
Wow. Can it even get me into the Vatican, Dad?
Get you in? It'll get you cocktails and dinner with the Pope. This fake Shiz-jig CEO ID is the real deal, son, and exactly what today's modern now-a-go-go person needs to excel in today's world. When people learn you're the CEO of the world's most beloved company, believe you me, they'll treat you differently.
I'm so proud of you, Dad. This is a great idea. Tell the listeners how to order their own.
I'm proud of me too, Danny. And if our listeners head over to the fake Shiz-jig CEO ID.com, they can purchase this wonderful social climbing aid and get out of jail free card that is accepted in more places than a Swiss passport.
Will the purchasers still have to carry a birth certificate or driver's license too, Dad?
Not a chance, son. This is the only upfront, fully admitted to being a total scam ID in the entire world. That gives it a certain cachet, don't you think? And amazingly, admitting it's a fake makes it completely legitimate. And like all fine Shiz-jig products, this fake CEO ID card will not rust, meander into mold, or cause skin wrinkles or hot dog fingers. And yes, it's 100% ant-proof too.
Wow, Dad.
Yes. Wow, son.
The Shiz-jig ID is completely legal because we admit it's fake. You will not have any actual position whatsoever at the Shiz-jig Corporation. And the consequences of lying to or deceiving the authorities are your responsibility. But it will be the best $10,000 you'll ever spend, so order today. The Pope has your dinner reservation waiting. Thanks for that. And let's continue, Christopher.
All right, where are we? We were talking about isomorphism.
Well, we went through that. You said, how are you going to craft a metaphor?
Let's talk about it.
Let's talk about salubrious metaphors. They're one of my favorites. And a salubrious metaphor is a metaphor that causes a positive response to pretty well anyone you tell it to. And they're often metaphors about someone overcoming difficulty or whatever.
Right.
I just think it's useful. So when you learn some metaphors, learn some simple ones about people overcoming difficulty, but make them interesting. You don't want to Ken Sweatman a metaphor.
Absolutely, because if you lose people's interest, you lose rapport, and then they don't work.
Engage them with your intention. That's the key. When you're telling it, don't do it in an offhand way. I've told many times, I told a metaphor to an Irish woman on a plane and helped her get over her grief, talking hypnotically. Now, I couldn't look at her because she was beside me. We'd be twisted around and I'd be breathing in her face, but I still did it with intention. And I said it with meaning and focus. Remember to slow down gradually as your story builds to the ultimate ending. In any case, you want to tell a story recognizing that it is going to have a response of some kind, even if their response is just, oh, what a boring person, you know? So find a salubrious metaphor. Find a metaphor of someone who overcame some immense problem and tell it to the person. And you can tie it to their situation, just like Erickson did, by simply saying, that reminds me of the story of. As soon as you say that, their unconscious is going to map it across to their situation. And I say, what stories are too old to keep telling in your life? This is out of Chinese medicine, Chris. It's really interesting. Chinese medicine, they talk in the new year. I looked at Dr. Zhang's stuff on this. He talked in the new year when that rolls around. They say, what stories are you going to discard now?
Ooh.
What stories are so old? You've told them so many times. Yeah. And by that, it might be the story of, oh, my life never works. Or,
What stories do you keep telling yourself that it's time to let go of?
Isn't it time to start getting new stories and telling them to yourself? So what is your metaphor? You know, and when I studied with Chris Dunkley, my first NLP trainer, he's since deceased. He was a real wizard. He said at the beginning of our NLP practitioner training, he said, what is the metaphor of your life? And the one I picked was a library.
Ooh, nice.
Because to me, it was
do you think learning is important?
Yeah, learning is important for me, hugely important. And having all these shelves loaded with stuff, books and things in my mind was a very powerful thing. But he said, and he pre-framed it, he said he wanted the class to notice their metaphor was their story for their life. It was just a frozen story. He wanted to know what it was going to be like at the end of the training. And the way he did his trainings was not, consecutive days like, most people do now, but multiple weekends, maybe one weekend a month for 6 months or something. And the final day we checked in with our metaphors and mine had changed. It wasn't a library anymore. It was a biosphere.
Ooh.
Because it was alive.
Yeah.
And it was isolated, bulletproof and safe, but it was thriving, not just stale, dated, dusty books.
Yes, experiences and movement and change, not just
So what's the metaphor
words.
for your life, Fritz?
Well, I think it's Mars. No, I'm kidding. No, nothing's coming to mind right now.
Oh, that's frightening.
Yeah.
That's frightening. What else have you
But
completely
you know
lost
what?
the
What I
picture from?
thought would be useful here is we suggest that you begin to keep a journal of metaphors that are
Ooh,
useful.
yeah.
Because if you start writing down the things from your own life that are going to be useful as salubrious metaphors. So if you know about, like, I'll give you a simple example. My former brother-in-law, only because my sister and he are divorced now, but great guy. When he was young, he struggled in school. And they thought that he had a learning disability and wanted to put him into a remedial school. And his parents refused to accept it because they were right. He was a brilliant kid. And he went on to become a chartered accountant and very,
nice.
very successful. And it goes to show you, right? It's if you tell a story about that, like I don't know all the details, but that's a real story that his parents could tell. Or if I knew it in detail enough, I could tell it. And it's dissociated enough from the listener, but it's still going to mean something. Right?
Yeah, that's
They're going to
nice.
relate to the idea of overcoming this challenge. When somebody says you have a limitation and you don't accept it and say, no, I don't have a limitation. I just don't have the skills right now.
That's really interesting.
Right.
I remember the true story about a kid in the U.S., I believe it's Louisiana, and the woman was pregnant with this boy, and there was very serious medical concerns, and they said he was going to be born mentally handicapped, and they were urging her to abort the kid, and she didn't. And he wound up being so freaking bright, he passed his bar exams at age 17.
Wow.
And just like interesting, you can never be sure.
Yeah.
So my question is, let's look at a metaphor for problem solving in your own life. When you have a problem to solve, ask yourself things like, let your unconscious work on this. How is your problem like a kitchen?
Yeah.
How is it like a racetrack? How is it like a bouquet of flowers, a spaceship, a submarine, a vacuum cleaner? It doesn't matter what you map across.
It's interesting because this is sort of like the word generator that we use with every podcast.
It is.
And you apply the word, you go, well, how is this problem like, a kitchen, a racetrack, a mountain, a maze,
an expensive meal.
How is this problem like a Halloween costume?
Like an
There we
iPhone
go.
11 Pro Max.
Out of date now. Already out of date. Already out of date.
But let's end with this. Chris alluded to it earlier, but an extremely complex story / metaphor is Journey to the Castle.
Right.
There are layers of symbols, Easter eggs, events designed to induce, deepen, and stabilize trance states. And then it can bring transformation.
It's a master class in listening to storytelling. So
Thanks, buddy.
MikeMandelHypnosis.com/castle. That's
and now,
definitely
Chris, you
where
can
you're
give
gonna
us
wanna
our
go.
empowering question of the day.
Okay, empowering question for episode 164 is, ask yourself, what are the stories that you keep on telling, even if they're out of date or no longer useful? And what is the story of your life now that you know how much it actually matters?
Ooh, ho, ho, ho. Well, I have a Meta 5, Chris, and then we'll cut everybody loose because we have videos to shoot.
Yes, we do.
I want to talk to you about Nino, Claudio, and the push stick. I bet you don't know
I
this
have
one.
no idea where this is going.
When I lived in our second house on Milverton Boulevard, we moved to Canada in 1957 to 407 Milverton, then up to 504. My parents moved around a lot. They were sort of nomads. And a new kid moved into the neighborhood. And this is back in, the early 60s. And kids who were different than us, it was really difficult to get to know them. It was just odd. So this new kid, Nino, moved into the neighborhood. His real name was Gaetano, but they called him Nino. And he was Italian. His English was getting there. And it's sad looking back now because clearly he wanted to hang out with my friends and I. He lived about 5 houses up the road, and he'd come and just sort of hang around the front of our house on the sidewalk. And my friends and I, we thought his name was Eno. And we'd say, go home, Eno. And he'd say, no, I don't have to. And eventually what opened the door was my father met his father. And his father was a very nice man, wonderful gardener too. And he had been a prisoner of war, the Italian army in the war. And he was captured by the British. And he was thrilled because he said the British treated them nicely and kindly. And my dad being ex-British Army, they formed a bond and just sat and had a glass of wine together. It was a very nice thing. And so I started hanging around with Nino and we got him into our group of friends. And he was a great guy. We really liked him. And he had a little brother, this tough little Italian kid called Claudio. And Nino had taken an old wagon, you know, the wagon that you pull with a handle and you deliver your newspapers, whatever. And what they were doing then, kids would take the wheels off, get a sheet of plywood, screw them onto this and get a rope for the handlebars or, you know, for the steering and make a little go-kart without a motor. But we called it a hot rod. My sister would say, no, a hot rod is a souped up car. No, these are hot rods. I so wanted one of these. And Nino had one. And Claudio would sit in this, drive around, and Nino had a push stick that looked like an old rotten piece of siding. And he'd put it on the back of this and shove it up the street running, and Claudio would drive this thing and yell. And one day, my mother brought home a tub of ice cream, this rainbow-colored ice cream, and I brought it out on a cone, was eating it. And Nino's eyes lit up. He said, Mike, if you would give me one of those, I would give you anything. I would give you anything. I said, will you give me the hot rod? And he said, no. I said, will you give me the push stick? And he said, yeah, Claudio. And he said something in Italian, and push stick. Claudio went and brought this horrible old stick, handed it to me. I got him an ice cream cone. And later on, I was never able to figure out why I traded an ice cream for an old piece of wood. I think, Chris, that it was anchored to the hot rod in my mind.
Yeah.
Oh, I can't have that, but at least I can have the push stick.
That's hilarious.
Totally weird, but I admit it. So it's okay.
Thanks, everybody, for listening. This has been episode 164 of the Brain Software Podcast. And if metaphors are your thing, then you have two choices. You can either sign up to the Mike Mandel Hypnosis Academy at MikeMandelHypnosis.com. Free trial. There's an entire 2 lessons on metaphors, plus all kinds of other awesome stuff in there. You will learn this stuff and learn it well. The other choice is the free version. Go and download Journey to the Castle at MikeMandelHypnosis.com/castle. The good news is both options are free. The Mike Mandel Hypnosis Academy is a free trial. Learn hypnosis, learn metaphors. The Journey to the Castle is a free download.
And make sure you're wearing headphones or earbuds. You'll need them.
All right. And we will talk to you in the next episode. Thanks again. And good night.